Here's what's coming up on your horizon. Well, the first Monday of September typically means summer's over and the white shoes, well, they should be heading to the closet. But the Labor Day holiday also marks much more than just the changing of the seasons. We begin today with the history of Labor Day, whose origins are a bit more rough and tumble than you may suspect. We'll show you how a hard day's work helped pull our country out of the Great Depression and has left us with some truly remarkable landmarks.
We started really in 1933 with the CCC, one of my favorite programs in American history.
Courtney May tells us about an upcoming event that is going to bring some top talent into the state while helping raise money for St. Jude's Hospital.
Barrel racing is being an event for Oklahoma that our people in Oklahoma are very interested in and follows very closely.
And we remember Labor Commissioner Mark Costello. Stay with us for Oklahoma Horizon.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education.
Oklahoma's investment in Career Tech provides more than nationally recognized technology education and training. It produces solid financial returns for the state's economic future. Oklahoma Career Tech, elevating our economy.
And the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. And now, from the Career Tech Studios in Stillwater, here's your host, Rob McClendon.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, for most of us, Labor Day is a holiday most Americans do anything but. A day off work to celebrate work itself. And while over the years, Labor Day has come to signify the traditional end of summer, Labor Day's roots, well, they go much deeper. First celebrated in New York in 1882, Labor Day's origins were no picnic in the park. While there were parades, there were also protests demanding fair wages, the end of child labor, and the right to form a union. This at a time when people often worked 12 hours, 6 days a week, in dirty, often dangerous jobs. Things like vacation, health care, and retirement pensions virtually unheard of. In the following years, the idea of a Labor Day did catch on, though, in America, but it wasn't easy. Protests led to riots, leaving people dead in the street. But in 1894, President Grover Cleveland made Labor Day a national holiday, only days after sending 12,000 soldiers to bust a railroad strike. In spite of this new holiday, it was a long time before workers began to see much change. In the middle of the Great Depression, FDR signed a law ending child labor and establishing an 8-hour, 5-day work week. America's workers continued to gain power in the 1950s when a third of the labor force was unionized and America's economy was booming. But beginning in the 1960s, factories began to close and many of the lowest skilled jobs outsourced to other countries, a trend that the CEO of Snap-on Tools believes can only be reversed with a change in America's attitude towards labor.
And the problem is, America has lost the respect for the dignity of work.
Nick Pinchuk told members of Oklahoma's Business Roundtable that many of the answers to revitalizing our economy lie in the middle.
America is a great country, and it's a great country because of the middle class and the achievement of the American dream. It has succeeded not only because of the brilliance of the few, but the efforts of the many. We are challenged today because we're in a global competition, a conflict, and our number one weapon in that conflict is career and technical education, which will upskill our workforce and allow them to differentiate them and win the competition to be the amplifiers for the ideas. Grow the middle class again. And to do that, as businessmen, as educators, as government people, we need to cooperate to shape the curriculums to be demand-driven. Call in the airstrikes so what kids are studying is exactly what's going to lead to a job. We need to change We need to change the optical outlook on these jobs. We need to restore the respect for the dignity of work. We need to bring the American dream back to what made this great, that is prosperity and stability for a family in a great job, not necessarily a rock star job. And we need to change these consolation prizes to an American calling, a national calling. And then finally, we need to actually say that technical education is important. And like we all tell our employees, actually act like it.
Now I do have Snap-on CEO Nick Pinchuk's full speech streaming on our website, and I can tell you it's well worth a watch. Now when we return, a look at how America worked itself out of the Great Depression.
You're watching Oklahoma Horizon, featuring some of the good things that are happening in the great state of Oklahoma.
The year 1933, parts of Oklahoma ravaged by the Dust Bowl, and the country in the midst of the Great Depression. And 1 in 3 Oklahomans are on some type of government relief. But during these dire days began 2 programs that improved lives around the country and gave us buildings and landmarks we still enjoy today. Standing atop a rocky outlook over glimmering waters, Tucker Tower is an iconic landmark that can be seen from most any vantage point on Lake Murray. Limestone slabs cut by hand and stacked skyward. An ideal lookout to see the beauty of this area outside Ardmore, Oklahoma. But it's inside the tower, lining the walls, the story of how America worked its way out of the Great Depression and is best told by the Oklahoma History Center's Bob Blackburn.
Despite the boom in farm and ranch from 1898 to 1929, despite the oil boom from 1905 in Glenpool to the 1930s, Oklahoma finally descended into the black hole of the Great Depression. Bank closures, people going unemployed, people leaving, hitting the road. The Grapes of Wrath would depict one of those families leaving the land and going to California. Almost a third of all Oklahomans unemployed. And I think most importantly, people were losing hope. They were losing hope that tomorrow would be better. We've had these boom times, now we're on the slide down. We had to do something to improve the morale, as well as to put food on the table. There was no Social Security system at the time. There was no welfare department in the state of Oklahoma. You were on your own unless a family member or a church or the community would step up and say, we will help.
And it was during these desperate times, just days after taking the oath of office,
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God.
President Roosevelt signs into law the Federal Unemployment Relief Act.
We started really in 1933 with the CCC, one of my favorite programs in American history, especially when you think about what it did for that generation and what it's done for us ever since. In the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps was a brainchild coming out of the Franklin D. Roosevelt administration, one of the earliest of the New Deal programs, trying to provide direct relief for the unemployment and the suffering. And it was not welfare. It was let's go to work. Let's do something that helps the community. And these kids, aged 18 to 25, would go off into a military type setting, and they would get training from Army personnel. So they would drill. So they were learning discipline. They were learning how to work together. They were learning skills. And then the objective of the CCC was, as the name implied, conservation. Let's build shelter belts. Let's take care of erosion. Let's go into communities and do something together to conserve the quality of life in a community with an amphitheater or a public library or a public swimming pool or bridges that needed to be repaired so people could get from here to there. And so the CCC was one of those early programs that made such a vital difference. And then on the other side of that coin, the public side to the private side, those kids were learning lessons about life, and they had the ability to send $25 of their $30 monthly pay home to the family. That money was used generally to put food on the table, to provide the necessities of life at a time when people were wondering, where is my next meal coming from? And leading to the desperation of the Joad family in Grapes of Wrath and saying, I've got to get out of here. I've got to leave my home. I've got to leave my family, my roots, my church, and hit the road into the great unknown. That's an act of desperation. That's what we were dealing with in the early 1930s.
So essentially recognizing at the time that a public works program was better than public assistance.
Exactly, and that was the beauty of the CCCs. And then that would continue with the Works Progress Administration, the WPA, as it's better known. Now that came a little later in Oklahoma because we had a governor at the time, Alfalfa Bill Murray, who was an old-time populist, states' rights advocate. He did not want the federal strings on grants. And the WPA, the PWA, the Public Works Administration, as well as the Works Progress Administration, provided block grants to the states. And then the theory is that the state, then working through its sub-units, such as the Parks Department that was created in the 1930s, cities and counties, would then raise the money for the materials, and the PWA, WPA would provide the money for the labor, with the idea we are going to put people to work. We're going to put a shovel in their hand. We're going to get them on a project, building a city hall, a convention center, a county courthouse, a bridge, a road, whatever it was that would improve the quality of life. That's how that money would be spent. And it was not geared to efficiency so much and mechanization, but it was geared to employing people. So yes, you might have been able to hire a crew on a tractor to do something in a week, but instead they would employ 30 people and take a month. And so the mission was really a dual thing. It was to do something for the community and then to provide employment for these people who wanted to work but had no opportunity to work. Instead of taking a handout, they were given a hand up.
And with guidance from experienced craftsmen, the CCC enrollees were able to take stone that was quarried from right here in the state park and hand-hewn lumber and turn it into beautiful buildings that have withstood the test of time.
You can go into almost any community and I can recognize WPA architecture. It was a certain style. You can go into a state park like Murray State Park and go to Tucker Tower, and there are about another dozen or so buildings that date to the CCCs. You can go into Old Platte National Park, Chickasaw Recreation Heritage Area, and see the picnic pavilions. It's a very definite style, inspired by the National Park Service architecture that you still can see in Yellowstone. You can see it at the Grand Canyon. Well, the states were adopting the same. It was a very organic architecture, using natural materials, cut to look as they might have in the natural state, and instead of doing the manufactured, the machined look. It's going back to nature and that organic architecture. You see it in the armories that are made out of not cut stone, but natural stone. You see it in the big log timbers used as rafters in some of these outdoor pavilions. You see the big massive piles of stone that tie the architectural style of a building to the ground. It's a particular style that's pervasive throughout Oklahoma. And many of those buildings are still being used, no matter what community you're in. And you can drive down Route 66 and find those structures, or you can go to any community. It's all around us, still making a difference.
And while it's the infrastructure we may see, these programs, these WPA programs, also were worried about preserving some cultural heritage.
They were. The WPA also wanted to make a difference in arts, in the literature area of our culture. And so they created programs such as the Oklahoma Writers Project. Well, at the time, the state got the block grant, and the money was given to the Oklahoma Historical Society of that day and time. We had just built the old historical building, that's now the Judicial Building, 21st and Lincoln, and we had the space in the building, and so unemployed journalists, unemployed writers, and others who had some writing ability were hired in the Writers Project, and they were sent out into the state, the Indian Pioneer Papers, interviews with pioneers and Indians who had made the Trail of Tears in the 1830s and 40s, were still around at the time. So those memories were collected and written in books. Today, the Indian Pioneer Papers, 116 volumes of first-person narrative from our pioneering experience, indexes to newspapers, histories of local communities, landmarks. It added to our understanding of Oklahoma, and at the same time, it employed those people who had some skills that were misapplied using a shovel on a highway, but they could sit at a typewriter and write the story of a pioneer who founded the town of Chickasha or Waurika or some other little town.
And unique artwork hanging in many of our federal buildings too come from that era.
Exactly. The Arts Project would be used. American Indians who were just learning to express themselves in a new way through their own interpretation of art were hired to do murals. There was an entire book about Indian New Deal art in Oklahoma post offices and public buildings.
Employing more than 90,000 Oklahomans. But just as importantly, what the CCC and the WPA did was prepare what's been called the greatest generation of Americans for the storm clouds of war that was soon to be on their horizon.
Well, of course, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, the nation had to come together immediately. And you saw that with the leadership of Franklin Roosevelt, the leadership in the Congress, and the nation rallied to one purpose. I believe that the 1930s lead up to that had an impact because instead of everyone out on their own, survival of the fittest, if you were hungry, too bad if you couldn't find it. The weak shall perish and the strong shall survive. Well, instead of that, you had these programs that draw us back together, using facilities that are part of these programs to build infrastructure. It was for us, not for one company, not for one person, but it was for all of us. And that sense of community was at the heart of the CCC and the WPA and the PWA in trying to work together for the common good. And with that culture there at the grassroots level, when it's time to go to war, when we have to be united, one voice speaking and determined to win, then we were ready.
And despite their legacy, FDR's New Deal programs do have their detractors. If you'd like to make up your own mind and learn more about the history of the New Deal, after the show, head to our website at okhorizon.com and look for a link we have set up to one of my favorite spots on the web. It's called Crash Course in U.S. History, where you can get pretty educated in about 15 minutes.
Still to come on Oklahoma Horizon, helping children at every turn. But first, a remembrance.
Mark Costello served as Oklahoma State Labor Commissioner from his election in 2010 to his death 2 weeks ago. In that time, he was known for his conservative principles, but also for an ability to work across the aisle with others who may not agree with him. Earlier, he visited our studios to record an interview that we were going to show you on this Labor Day edition of Horizon.
There is no profit motive within government, but we do have an obligation to get out of the way of people seeking their dreams, people seeking to build their business, and people seeking to compete.
Out of respect for our grieving friends and family, that conversation will go unaired. But I do want to share a story that if you ever met Mark, you'll certainly appreciate, because he loved to give out money, all in an effort to prove a point. And it revolves around this, a $200 million bill from Zimbabwe. At one time, I think he probably had a wallet full of them, not because he was exceedingly wealthy, but because they're worth virtually nothing. A reminder for him and anyone who would listen that the money in our pocket is only as good as the government that backs it up. And while many of the functions of Oklahoma's Labor Department are to regulate, he knew that every action they took could either help or hurt everyday Oklahomans. And with that in mind, he believed his office was as much about economic development as it is regulation. Mark Costello was just 59, and he'll be missed. Want to share something you've seen here today? Well, all of our episodes are streaming on our YouTube channel at Oklahoma Horizon TV, or you can subscribe to our weekly free podcasts on iTunes. Well, the largest indoor rodeo arena in the world is getting set to kick off an event that will help children battling cancer and other life-threatening diseases. Joining me now from our state capitol is our Courtney May.
Well, Rob, I'm here at the state capitol where representatives from the Lazy E Arena and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry are holding a press conference to announce the launch of the St. Jude Barrel Jam.
St. Jude Children's Hospital cares for millions of children who are battling life-threatening illnesses every day, leading the way the world understands, treats, and defeats childhood cancer and other diseases.
People come to us at their darkest time when their children have been diagnosed with cancer.
And thanks to private donations, every family who has a child in St. Jude Children's Hospital leaves expense-free.
We're able to pay for everything, the housing, the travel, of course the care, the research. Our real focus is to allow that family to focus on the most important thing in their lives, and that is getting that child well.
And that's because of the generosity from people like Micah and Leslie McKinney, the owners of the Lazy E Ranch in Guthrie, Oklahoma.
Anything we could do to help out such a great organization we were fully on board with, and to combine St. Jude's with the Lazy E, there's no telling where we can go.
The McKinney family agreed to host the first St. Jude Barrel Run at their nationally recognized ranch. And with a personal connection to childhood cancer, hosting the event has a special meaning to the McKinneys.
I was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor at the age of 11, so I really understand what it's like for the importance of childhood research for cancer and just providing those children a safe, fun environment when they go through the treatment.
To host an event like this, to bring people in and to bring St. Jude's in that's known around the world, I think is a huge, huge benefit to our state.
Senator Justice says the love for barrel racing in the state makes Oklahoma the perfect place to host this event.
Barrel racing has been an event for Oklahoma that our people in Oklahoma are very interested in and follows very closely. And so then St. Jude's, the fact that have done so much work and research with kids and young people, that it just was a real connection there, a real opportunity to help a lot of people, plus an event that people can appreciate.
The event is scheduled to take place October 2nd through 4th, and with planning underway, the entrants are excited to compete in a historic arena for a great cause.
And these ladies are very excited about participating at the Lazy E and for St. Jude's, and I expect to be a lot of fun there.
I expect a lot of high intensity, just fun and family oriented things going on all the time. You know, the property is so great for such an event because it does have an environment for families and children, and you can just kind of spread out and enjoy being there. So we're really looking forward to the planning phase of it.
Well, the event already has 1,000 entries and they're off to a good start, but what they need now is sponsors, and they also need people to show up to the event and fill the seats.
All right, thank you so much, Courtney.
You're welcome, Rob.
Now, the St. Jude's Barrel Jam runs at the Lazy E Arena from October 2nd through the 4th. You can keep up with us throughout the week. Just head to okhorizon.com, where you can see more of any of our stories, read our reporters' behind-the-scenes blogs, see what others are saying about us on Twitter, and face the facts with our regular updates. So reach out and touch us anywhere and anytime. The tragic death of Labor Commissioner Mark Costello is a stark reminder of the struggles family members of the mentally ill often suffer. Next time on Oklahoma Horizon, we look at mental health treatment here in Oklahoma.
The biggest problem is our system does not handle mental health like any other health issue. And it is just like every other health issue.
The state of our mental health on Oklahoma Horizon. Now, traditionally, Labor Day marks the end of summer when wearing white after the first Monday in September becomes a bit gauche. And even that has roots in the early days of the labor movement, when only the upper reaches of society could wear white because of the difficulty of just keeping it clean. So the labor movement, proud of its working class roots, purposely avoided white altogether, a class difference that eventually led to a fashion statement. So while most Americans will enjoy Labor Day as our annual farewell to summer, just know as you're tucking those white shoes away in the closet that in some small way you pay homage to the early labor leaders and the benefits they provide American workers even today. I'm Rob McClendon. Thanks for including us in your day. See you back here next week.
Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. Thank you for watching Oklahoma Horizon.